Hello and welcome to Conscious Conversations. We're three best friends on a mission to explore life's deeper questions and celebrate the power of spiritual growth. I'm your host, Brittany, joined by my co-hosts, Nicole and Ashley. And together we're here to share insights, personal stories, and practical tools for mindful living. Whether you're curious about meditation, energy healing, astrology, or simply looking for ways to find more peace and purpose, you've come to the right place. Let's dive in and discover what it means to live with greater awareness and an open heart.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. It is one that we are very excited about, and the topic of discussion is the dragons. Now, there's a lot of different aspects and topics as we go into this, and I do just want to let our listeners know that we had to really shift the frequency of this recording to be able to hold and work with these beings here. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling a lot of intense energy, just ask for a moment to calibrate to the best working frequency while listening to this, because that is how dragons can feel. And I feel like that's a good place to start, is that when connecting with these energies, dragons can feel really intense. Sometimes you'll physically get hot and warm. Sometimes you'll feel a little dizzy. Sometimes your energy will have a very physical response, as well as a lot of increased thoughts and things of that sort. So if you get downloads, or if that happens throughout this, you want to pause this and grab a piece of paper to write down what you may experience throughout this, I feel like that's a really good idea. One thing to note is that dragons are really powerful mystical beings. You probably have known what they are, but you might not be fully aware that they are actual beings that you can work with. So I would like to ask our other hosts if they have any experience of like the first time they either felt or had seen a dragon, either worked with them or just connected to them in a way of spiritual understanding.
My first experience with them was actually a reading I had with you, Ash, and they had come through. And I felt so overwhelmingly dizzy. And then I ended up taking a nap for like 2 hours on the sofa with my son. So it wasn't even just that I was affected, that like the energy around me was so felt. And that was my first like real experience with them. And then from there, it really just came in at times of like needing additional cleansing, like cleansing of my home, cleansing of my space. I felt like they were really, really wanting to assist me with that.
I can't remember the first time I worked with them, but the most recent time that I can remember was with Ash. And she put together a little, I guess it was sort of a class, and she introduced us to our dragon or the dragons that were coming in to assist and help. And it was actually something really cool because there was a lot of clear communication that I had with them. And it's always really cool to get validation from divinity and these type of beings. And there was quite a few things that I just jotted down as I was doing the meditation, and was able to kind of check what they meant later on. Like this dragon specifically gave me their name. And at that time during the summer, I was dealing a lot with like balance within life. And so they came in quite literally as like a black and white dragon. It was really cool. And like the imagery of them was really cool. But then when they gave me their name, I looked it up, and it quite literally meant balance, which was incredible. And then they told me like the type of stones they prefer, the type of incense they prefer, the type of offerings they like, and all that. So it was actually really cool. It was pretty profound.
Thank you guys so much for sharing those things. It brings up a lot of fun memories I have of like connecting people with this energy. I personally connected with it during like pandemic. I've shared this story before in the podcast, but in case you guys haven't heard it, I went randonauting, which back then it was you put coordinates in an app of whether you wanted to attract something, manifest something, and it brought you to this random place that you never would have been at before. And you set an intention to potentially feel or see something. And my intention was I'm connecting to something. I'm seeing numbers. I don't know what is going on. If there's something that's trying to connect with me, let yourself be known. And that's what I saw dragons clear as day in the sky, in the clouds, like a cloud manifestation of them. And we'll say I'm kind of giggling. One time prior, I saw them when I was on mushrooms, very vividly on mushrooms. That was when I was in college and not really, I was just like, oh, cool, a dragon. I also saw elephants, so I didn't really like think a lot, of that energy and of that frequency. But within connecting with those energies, I really like that you guys bring up like the way you felt and also like the balance and the yin and yang energy because dragons are very dualistic creatures. That's one of the things that they can teach people really well and really strongly is how to find duality within self as well as balance within self, but also bring that into a way of alchemization. And if you guys aren't familiar with alchemy, it's essentially taking something that is either out of balance or is out of frequency that no longer is working for you, transforming it, transmuting it, transitioning it. There's so many ways that you can phrase it into a frequency that is working for you. And I will say that is probably the biggest thing aside from the psychic flames. We'll talk about the psychic flames in a second, but that's probably the biggest thing that I still use to this day that the dragons have shown and taught me. Do you guys feel like there's anything that they've showed or kind of taught you that you still really use in either your practice or your day to day, whether that is something that specifically relates to dragons or something that they maybe made you aware of within yourself?
One of the first things that I noticed with the dragons in the way that they were coming to me is like the entities on my team have dragon aspects. And so that was really interesting because the way that I feel and sense energy is sometimes a little bit hard to discern what I'm actually tapping into without getting like a visual with it. And I remember having one of my team members step forward and then they kind of in meditation and they kind of morphed into this dragon and there was like it was the same energetic frequency and I was like what is going on, it was heightened but it was about the same, I could tell it was still them. And so that was something that kind of opened my eyes to just like how different entities can have different types of aspects, which was really cool. It was actually really, it broadened my practice so much, like I can't even. And then yeah, and then another thing that I really do prefer using them for, I feel like they're really, really great at cleanses and like unblocking stuff. Like that's the number one thing. Anytime I feel weird or like I just got back from a couple days away from my house and I walked into my house and I could feel the denseness and I was like, oh, I got to call on the dragons. Like, so they're really great at helping me to cleanse my house. That's what I prefer to. I prefer if they're willing to help me with those things.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I definitely use or call on their assistance when it comes to cleansing my home. I will say for me too, like they offer like a really big sense of safety for me. Like whenever I see myself like with my dragon or near my dragon, or it's always like this enveloping sense of safety that like that nothing can penetrate, nothing can get close to me, nothing can go wrong. It's just ultimate safety, security, protection with this sense of like calmness and confidence.
I really love that you shared that, Nicole, because that makes me think of our previous episode to this was shadow work. And I feel very similarly about these beings of the way that they were able to allow me to feel safe whilst facing my shadows. And they're very dualistic again with like the light and the dark frequencies. So they very much work within that energy in a way that feels like it's not impossible to alchemize and to work through. And I think it's really important for, our listeners that are interested in dragons or are listening to this and really thinking for the first time of like, I think I might be being reached out to by a dragon. If you are thinking that you have been, you probably are. That has been my motto for it from the start. If you feel connected to dragons, you probably are. It is not common to feel connected to dragons. I personally attract a lot of energies that feel connected to dragons just due to my soul's energy. And I am willing to share like my higher self is a very dragon-esque soul. So within that energy is really attracted within these spaces. So as being a person within this podcast, you're probably attracted to some aspect of this and potentially that dragon aspect as well. And I think that is an interesting thing to note with like the protection and the cleansing. The dragons really allowed me to be aware of the usage of like color theory within like psychic flames, but also within like crystals and what I would wear. And this is something that when I was making an outline earlier was important to really bring into the podcast. So allow our listeners to know that the psychic flames, so the cleansing energy that the dragons have, you can call upon that, but you can also call upon their healing flame, which is blue. The cleansing flame is kind of like a red. We have the transmutation, which is purple. There's many of them. Um, when you first start working with dragons, a lot of times you'll wear a color that you're trying to represent through the flame. So, like, black can be a very protective color. The blue is very healing. If you find yourself all of a sudden wearing green, it can be very activating. So, it's a little different than kind of like the chakra energy. But I'm interested to know if you guys have felt connected to the psychic flames in any way or utilize those at all.
I've definitely used them in cleanses before. And I think my example was probably you. But yeah, I've definitely, when I've sat in meditation and I needed them to kind of come in to help me cleanse, I've used them to help, or like the different colors to unblock things within my chakras. So it's interesting that you just said that they're a little bit different, right? They're a little bit different in the colors of our chakra system. But I've always tried to kind of just like lean into what that felt like whatever it was, like whether it was my heart space or I usually associate everything with the color black. I don't know why, but the entity that's on my team that came forward in their dragon form, they were a black dragon. I've worked with a few different dragons, and they're either black, red, and then the one that was like black and white. And so those are kind of like the only color associations that I've really used other than like within meditation and using just intuitively what I think is right there. Also the rainbow flame, right? I've used the rainbow flame, which is I think a little less uncommon. I would have to ask you that, Ash. And what is that used for? But I do remember calling on the rainbow flame. I'm not sure why though.
The rainbow flame is a very kind of like sacred, all-encompassing energy. So it has like the blue, the red, the violet. It has all the flames in them. So if you're kind of like in your light body, your energy is kind of like, I don't know what is going on, but I know I need something. That's what I usually call on
Uh,
rainbow flame. The reason I became aware of that was because when I was first like meditating, I would just see rainbow energy a lot before a dragon actually formed in front of me, before I actually knew what it was. And then when I started working with them, I was like, well, what? Why do you keep looking like a rainbow to me? And then they showed me the flames, and I was like, oh, okay.
That's really cool. I have to say that I actually have not ever called upon the psychic flames. If I've ever had them used on me in cleansing, it's always been with Ash. But I've never actually asked the dragons to cleanse me. I've only ever asked them if they could cleanse my home. And that's kind of a funny realization. I've never even realized that I've never asked them to help cleanse me, but I've asked them to help cleanse the home and the space.
The I'm giggling at that because I'm getting some like kind of like pokes energetically of kind of like the listeners and potentially like the host, like consent is important with the dragons. They are very much needing your consent to show up, to give their name, to let you know they're here, to cleanse you, to you. What the dragons will not do a single thing unless you are consciously aware that you are consenting to it. And I think that was the biggest hindrance to me when first working for these beings because I was like, I don't know what I need, but I know I need something. And they were like, well, you really need to tune in and like listen to your intuition and ask for what that is. And I found myself getting frustrated because I was like, well, are you supposed to help me figure that out? Which they were doing, but in a way that I found very frustrating. So these beings can be very triggering sometimes too, because they're not just going to hand you the messages, they're not just going to give you the teachings. I don't want to say you have to kind of earn it a little bit, but in a way you have to really you kind of got to figure it out. It's not going to be just handed to you like some beings are. And that brings us into kind of like the way to either consent or to allow these energies in or to offer them things. Dragons will very clearly let you know what they want. Dragon's blood is very common. They really like fruits and flowers and things of that sort. But if you've been offering your dragon something because they've told you they like that, keep doing that. It's very specific. But offerings can be really important to these beings. I found that they are the ones that ask for offerings more than kind of like anything else I've ever worked with. And I really think that's because of just their energy of creation and really needing that equal energy exchange.
I just want to talk about the how you said they're not going to just work with anybody. I find it really interesting, not just interesting that you say that, but I think it's funny because their energetic exchange has to be one of respect. Like you have to approach them with a lot of respect and understanding, and you have to be really humble as you approach them as well. I think that there are lessons we're talking a lot about cleansing and all that kind of things, but there are lessons that they also help you with. They come very fast and they come like they're a little bit abrupt sometimes when you're like, whoa, like if you just needed assistance with something small, it kind of, to me, it kind of snowballs into a lot of different areas in my life when I work with them. And I found that, as I'm like, I think this last year I probably worked with them more than I ever have. And I tried to do it on my own intentionally because I was trying to figure out the ins and outs of how they worked and what their expectations were. And the thing that I did find is that once they connect with you and they like you, they become family. Like they are always there. And I think maybe that's where that sense of protection comes in that you guys are talking about. They give a sense of just like, they always have your back. They're always around. There's nothing too big that you can ask of them as soon as you prove yourself to them. Because it's very easy, especially within spirituality or working with the divine or entities, whatever it is that you work with. It's very easy to constantly go to them and be like, well, I need this and I need that and I need this and I need that. And you can become very codependent. And that's quite the opposite of what these energies do. They teach you your independence and that you don't always need them and you actually don't even really need them. Their guidance is really great. Their protection is really amazing. Obviously, they're very good at, the things that we've already spoken of. But there is a sense of like you cannot lean on them for everything. You truly cannot.
Within that space, I think it's so important to also note that it's randomly popping in my head, and I had an outline to speak about. Essentially, dragon, when you, I'm giggling, my poor, when you connect with the dragons, sometimes they're not just going to connect with a cord. Sometimes you will, if you are very clairvoyant, will see that you feel like they've eaten you. It's very interesting way to connect. When that first started happening to me, I was like, I'm working with you, you're teaching me things. Why are you attacking me and trying to eat me? And it's a way that they connect. It's a way of equal energy exchange. It's also a way of like engulfing and activating within each other, but it's also a way to see if you're too triggered to even have the lesson they're trying to offer. Because if you get triggered with fear of being attacked or being eaten but aren't trusting your intuition that they're trying to help you, that counteracts the lesson that they might be trying to teach you. And that is more kind of like an advanced level of working with the dragons. But if you're at a level where you've worked with them for a while and you really want to connect with them, they're not all going to eat you either. But if you do feel like you're getting eaten, it just feels important to really note that energy. Have you guys ever been eaten before? I'm kind of curious.
Yes, yes, I have, and I immediately texted you because I think it was a dream, or it had to have been a meditation because I don't really remember a lot of my dreams, but I remember texting you and I was like, excuse my language, they fucking ate me, Ash, and she's like, yeah, that's how they alchemize with you. You're okay. And I was like, okay, we're good. But I remember that it was an aspect of one of the demons that I work. It was another demon that I work with, and so I remember walking up to them, and they were just like massive, like almost like if you were walking in New York and you're looking up at like all the skyscrapers, like that's how huge they were, like even bigger. And then they just ate me. And it was I then later went back into meditation like maybe a day or two later, and I was like, why, what, like, where were you? And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, I did that on purpose. And I was like, okay, that's just strange. I had no idea that was the thing that they did. It was so funny. And I just like remember texting Ash in a panic, like, one of the dragons ate me, dude. She's like, oh yeah, it's totally normal. It's fine. You're gonna be fine. It's great.
I feel like it's totally normal to be off put by that at first too. Like you're human. You're gonna have a human reaction to that. But you trusted it. That's the important part.
I mean, I'm fine for the most part, hopefully.
I don't have, uh, so I had like this one incident, I guess, when I had a reading with Ash, and I think we were doing like a dragon cleanse, or maybe it was the pods, and I don't remember if I gave them something and they ate it, but I think they gave me something and I ate it. And then I also, when one of the ways that I do offerings for them is that I eat fruit. So it's another like ingestion type of offering. So like I'll have like lots of like it depends on the fruit. Like sometimes I want like the more like citrusy fruit, sometimes I want more of like the melony fruit. So it really all depends, but I just kind of lean into whatever I'm feeling that I'm craving, and then I'll make sure that I have that available with the intention, like while I'm eating it, thinking of connecting to the dragons. Not that I'm wanting to connect with them in that moment, but just, I guess, being mindful of my thoughts while I'm eating it in a sense, if I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I do it.
It does make sense because you could really do anything as an offering with good intention for them, and then they'll course correct later. If you're first working with them, they're just like, we'll start with you just identifying and recognizing I'm here. And another interesting thing, Brittany, you brought this up at the beginning of the podcast. I really want to go around and just mention again that they shapeshift. They're not always going to look like a dragon to you. They have different aspects that they may show up as. They are very connected with their other aspects of self. And then there's many layers to this. So there's dragons that are color coded. There's dragons that are elemental coded. So there's like water, fire, earth, and air dragons. There's dragons that are connected to realms. There's dragons that are connected to cultures like Norse mythology and things of that sort. So there's dragons in a lot of different aspects of life, and they're considered very sacred in the sense of teaching, but also very sacred in a lot of religions and a lot of cultures, and they've been respected for many years for very divine and cosmic reasons. And something I learned that I really want to, bring forward to our listeners is that these beings to connect to humans work through a lot of healing and energy to do that. And what I mean by that is humans in certain incarnations would attack the dragons. There's a lot of trauma there. So the beings that are now able to work with these beings, there was a lot of healing done between these beings throughout time and throughout space. So they also can come through in a very like compassionate way for humans. But sometimes it is a human emotion, but sometimes they might ask that back of you as well. And that's kind of why consent's really important for them, or they might come through as kind of like a shape-shifting energy, because dragons and humans in those forms can be triggering to each other based on a soul level sometimes.
I will say on the fact of like shape shifting, I haven't really ever seen them shape shift in like one form to another, but I will say like I'll see them small and then big. Like, so depending on how they want to present to me or how I'm able to perceive their energy at that time, sometimes they'll be super, super large, and then other times it'll be like you could sit on my shoulder. So I think it's also depending upon like my energy and how I'm able to perceive it at that time.
Something that's really cool that I really enjoy it is when I'm tuning in with somebody or I'm working with somebody new, I can tell right away if they work with dragons or not. Like their energy is immediate. So, and I'm like, oop, this is why I like you because you're a dragon. Like immediate. It's really cool. And then there, I don't know if this is well known, but I think there's a thing with dragons and fairies. Have you guys ever heard of this? Where they don't necessarily get along very well. And I find that funny because as soon as I also connect with people who work with fairies, I'm like, that's why your energy is off-putting to me. Not saying anything against people who work with fairies. I actually have gotten very close to a few people that do. But I find the contrast of them really interesting because dragons can come in as elementals, and that's what I see fairies as. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe I need to do a little bit more digging with that and understanding like where those preconceived like opinions come from. Maybe I don't know.
I love that you bring that up because it's that energy of kind of like think of it as like the energy of creation. Like there's certain realms for certain things. So like the fairies have certain realms, the dragons have certain realms. Elemental connection on Earth is where they met. That's like the
Mm.
first place they kind of collided, if that makes sense. So dragons can be seen a lot in like Orion, Andromeda, Midgard on Earth, and a lot of Earth realms. Fairies have their realms and their planets too, and a lot of times they didn't mix until here. And here was when, for one reason or another, dragons and humans had their issues, and fairies and humans had their issues, and then vice versa with the dragons and the fairies. There's been a lot of healing in retrospect to that as well. But fairy energy, they can go in and manipulate creation, and dragons don't work that way. They create what's created, and if it's meant to be alchemized and transmuted, it will. It doesn't go through like the manipulation energy, if that makes sense.
Speaking of just another way we were talking earlier, sorry, I'm kind of circling back again, but another way that I definitely have worked with the dragons is with the weather. So if it's too hot or if it's too cold, I definitely will give a little extra offering and ask them to kind of help out with the weather. And whether it works or not, I feel like it does, but that's my own opinion of it. But I definitely have, or like if there's something going on and I'm like, oh, I just need it to be a bit cooler, just a couple degrees cooler. I have noticed like it does make a difference. For me anyway. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that.
All the time. If I'm looking at the forecast and know I have to drive, I'll ask dragons. I'm like, is there any way you can make the snow just like 2 hours later? They can work really well in all elements too. So it in the weather that can show up. That's also why they show up a lot in like trees and in the clouds if you want like that visual representation. Another interesting thing is like dragons are really connected to caves. So if you live by a cave, you may likely feel dragon energy within that space. That's a way that a lot of people connect with them in a physical sense is through caves and through that connection. Also crystals and crystal caves and things of that sort. But the connection of caves is being kind of like portals as well as volcanoes, very similar energy. Volcanoes are portals a lot of the times for dragons, and caves are as well. And another thing that the dragons want to make sure that are brought up is their names. This is just something to kind of throw into this episode here is the name of the dragon is going to be something that is given to you eventually. You might not get a name right off bat. So if you're working with a dragon, you really want their name. Usually they'll give you a name when you've worked with them for a while, and oftentimes they will also give you something like a staff or a crystal or something of that sort as an offering of the energy exchange. And when that exchange happens, usually it's a sign that you've like awakened the dragon within and awakened like the teaching within. And a lot of you have dragon connections, but also are dragons in other incarnations. Just like Brittany mentioned, she's worked with energies that have either worked with dragons or are a dragon, and you can tell, you can feel it in people's frequency really easily if they have that energetic signature. So, as we're kind of like wrapping up this episode, was there anything else you guys wanted to share about the way you've worked with the dragons, how they showed up, any final messages before we get into the channel message from the dragons specifically?
I think the advice that I would give people is move slow. The lessons that they teach are something that you will carry with you through this life and probably many more. There's no rush to get to know them or even work with them. Kind of let them come and go organically as they please. Try not to force the relationship with them and, just be as respectful as you possibly can. And once you make that connection with them and that friendship with them and they allow you into their family, there's really no going back. And honestly, it opens up so much of your spiritual gifts as well. So don't be surprised when we think of dragons, they are these mythical beings, and it's very hard for people who don't work with these type of entities to understand. But don't be closed off either. Allow yourself to be open to the idea of these things. And my advice is always don't judge yourself. So don't judge yourself as you're going through these things because at times it seems crazy, right? Like saying that you work with dragon energy, you're like, yeah, okay, but lean into the energetic signature of them rather than the name of them and then go from there and see where it takes you.
My last little tidbit would be kind of embracing the chaos. A little behind the scenes information is while we were trying to sit down and get this ready, it just felt very chaotic, very overly excited, all over the place. We're here, but we're all over the place. And that's kind of how that energy comes in. And it kind of in a way forces you to be uncomfortable with not being in control of everything and just
Mhm.
really feeling in, like, okay, well, let's just go where I need to go and letting them guide the way of the energy. And so that's I think my last little bit is just that embracing of the chaos.
I love that. We went through a whole episode about dragons and didn't mention chaos till the end, which I'm like sitting here giggling about. That's like the such an important aspect of the dragons, and we just experienced a year of the dragon. So for our listeners, we are heading into a lunar new year in some cultures. That is the year of the dragon just ended, and the year of the wood snake is coming up, and the year of the dragon is about chaos and destruction and destroying for new. And we're about to begin within the new. And a part of this channel message that the dragons are sharing with you today is really about. I'll kind of give it verbatim in the way that they're explaining it and not try to humanize it, and then I'll humanize it after. And I'm saying that because sometimes they can use very grand words, words that are not common vocabulary sometimes, but I'll just kind of like say it, verbatim for what they are speaking about. So, what's coming through is your energy is entering like an era of societal shifts, but also massive internal shifts. And when you experience that through our energy, dragon energy, that can come with a lot of abrupt stops, a lot of pauses, a lot of self-reflection. And with working within our energy and working within our frequency, a lot of the times you might feel as though your energy is having difficulty, navigating its identity, but your human identity is only a fractal of what you truly are. And that's a big part of what we are teaching a lot of you. Every 12 years, there is a wave of awakenings within dragon energy and then little waves here and there. We just went through a massive awakening of dragon energy, and that's your internal chaos. That's the way we're able to work with you in retrospect to your energy being a creator, being a co-creator, being source, but also your energy being divine, being divinity, and being able to, really create within your density is a skill. And that's what a lot of you have been releasing things in order to be able to align within. And with that, I'm about to say Ashley, which makes me feel funny because I'm like listening, but I'm channeling. Ashley asked us to bring forward an affirmation for you. And that affirmation is that you are always aligned within your own internal divine. You are always aligned with your own internal divine.
I feel like I need to like take that in for a minute. Thank you to the dragons and to Ash for that message.
I just wanted to give a special thanks to Ash for her messages today and for the dragons coming through. Always a special thanks to our listeners for keeping an open mind as we navigate these things together.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Conscious Conversations. We hope today's episode offered you new perspectives and a spark of inspiration on your spiritual journey. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe and share this podcast with someone who might resonate with our message. You can also connect with us on social media to keep the conversation going. Remember, we're all in this together, learning, growing, and expanding, one conscious step at a time. Until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep shining your light.